And so I always liked aviation. And so I said, I'm going to go be an air traffic controller because you get to be in aviation, but you don't have to be gone all the time because I love my animals. So I want to be home so I can ride and have my dogs and all that. So I got accepted to Ames Community College in Greeley, and for the first time in my life, I was focused in getting good grades and really loving it because I loved the aviation aspect of it. I loved being around it and the talk and all of that. And I had a professor there. I was in like my year and a half there, and he's like, I really recommend that you go take an intro flight. And that way you know what it's like to control and to, talk on the other end because pilots have a lot
Hmm.
going on while they're flying
Yep.
and controllers always get hot and heavy and you need to know that they're still flying too. Went and took an intro flight in a Cirrus here at KFNL in Loveland Airport, and I was hooked. I was completely hooked. All I wanted to do was get back on that airplane, and I wanted to learn more and fly more, and I wanted to do all the flying things. Well, it's expensive, right? I'm already living at my parents and I'm working at a Chevy dealer as a receptionist, so I'm not rolling in the dough. So I'm like,
Yeah.
how am I gonna fund this? And so one of my horses that I had taken home with me, I'd bought her for $500 in Illinois and trained her. I sold her for quite a bit of money, and I just took that huge check and I went to the flight school there, and I'm like, I want to be a
Wow.
pilot. And so with that, my Chevy dealer receptionist job didn't like that I was constantly calling out or taking my lunch break to go fly, and I had not a great flight instructor in the beginning. He was very into flying with me because I was a girl and building the hours, and he would take me up and scare me with the stalls and tell me I had to get over it. And there was a point in time where I was like, I'm not cut out. Like, this is tough. This is too hard for me, and I'm not cut out for it. So I got a job at the Fort Collins Loveland Airport, which became one of my most it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. Minimum wage, terrible hours. I started out at 2 to 10 p.m., but it allowed me to fly in the morning, and I was just saturated in aviation. And so I would have probably worked that job for free they had to let me. Living with my parents, no benefits, which my dad was just always hounding on me. He's like, you got to have benefits. But the manager there was, to this day, she's an amazing person, and she just always saw potential. She's like, you're going to be something someday, Sam. And so I kept going and I got written up a few times. I learned how to forward the phone at the desk to my cell phone so I could go out and like look at aircraft and hang or fly the Challengers that were in there. And so there's a couple times that she would call and she's like, "Did you just go out and start this Huey with this pilot?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was so cool." She's like, "You can't do that, Sam." And one night there was a blizzard out there, and another colleague and I, we took the trash dumpster off of the big trash dumpster there and tugged it around on the skid all along on the tarmac. But that job was awesome because I met some of the best people there and connections. And not only when it wasn't busy, as I was able to study for flying, which I always felt like I wasn't able to do that. And so I got my pilot's license. So then how did I get back into the flying thing? So there was a flight instructor there. His name is Art Hogue, and I will always accredit him to why I'm a pilot to this day because he said, there's nothing scary about flying. Why you're scared is you just don't know. Like, you don't know why the airplane stalls, and that's why you're scared. And so I would see him go in and out, and I would see his students progress. And one day he was like, hey, why don't you just come right along before your shift at the jet center? Just ride along in the back seat. He's like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to touch anything. Just come right along. Well, that turned into over and over, we started doing that. And I remember being in the back seat a couple times being like, man, I could turn around a point way better than this person is. And so he's like, hey, would you ever want to, go take a flight? Long story short, he's a huge reason of why I'm a pilot to this day. And
That's
fun
cool.
fact of here at the hospital, his dad is now retired, but his dad was the mechanic here at the hospital. So like in a roundabout way, it came back to, still being a part of him and his dad. And now he's the DPE here. He works for United Airlines, and he's flies a 767, and he does all the check rides around here. So it's cool to still see him. And actually last year, a year ago on Valentine's Day was actually the first day I soloed ever. I got to take him for a flight in the helicopter, which was pretty cool. 'Cause it
That's
just all
cool.
comes back. So that's how I got my fixed wing private pilot's license. And then from there, I went to Alaska and got a job up there at a company where I didn't have my helicopter license at the time. I had like 48 hours in the fixed wing. So I didn't know anything except for how to study and take a check ride. And so I went up there and yeah, the female, there was a male and a female who owned it, a husband and a wife, and she didn't really like that I was a girl up there because she said girls cause a lot of trouble and it takes the focus off all the pilots who are guys because they go up there without their families for months on end. And so I just started sweeping the hangar and changing the oil on the R44s. They had 9 R44s and 5 MD500s. So a pilot would always come in and, have the helicopter freshly off of a job, and they would need it turned around. So they need it vacuumed and the windows cleaned and the oils changed and all that. And so I was just happy to like be around the helicopters at the time. So I did that, and I was at the right place at the right time, enough times that the mechanic needed someone to do a run up on the helicopter, or they needed a cook on one of the jobs, so the pilots would take me with them. And everywhere in Alaska is a really, really long flight, so I would get 8 hours of flight time, and flying and going in and out. So I had enough hours at that point to go take my check ride. I was there all summer and we flew all the time, and it was light all the time. So we would fly 8 hours in the day and then 6 hours at night, and then same thing the next day. So I saved up my money again up there and then got a job doing, I saved up enough money and then my hours, and I went to Jerry Trimble Helicopters in McMinnville, Oregon, and got my commercial. And it was kind of, I skipped my private pilot's license, which at the time was doable. And I don't think you can do that anymore, but I skipped my private pilot's license. And it was probably one of the hardest check rides I've ever took because the examiner wasn't thrilled that I skipped my private. And, he's like, why are you skipping it? And, the private pilot's very important for your fundamentals of aerodynamics and how to fly and all this kind of stuff. But I skipped it. So I passed. But it was very nerve-wracking for me. And then from there, I worked another season with Blake at the time, who was my boyfriend, doing the wildlife stuff and the capture. And then at that point in time, we decided to buy our own company.